Gouache is a fun and versatile painting medium that allows you to paint fast and use the colors from your palette in their full strength. Gouache is easy to carry around and it's easy to clean up. And even though it might be challenging to use it in very hot and windy weather, to me it's still the best painting medium for plein air painting. Gouache is a very unique painting medium and it requires a specific approach. If you want to use gouache successfully, controlling its consistency is the key. In this video, I'll try to explain how I manipulate the consistency of my gouache in order to keep my colors opaque and vibrant. My whole setup for plein air painting with gouache is now in the frame. Here you can see my storage palette, the mixing tray and the two containers, one for water and the other for paper towels. Gouache paints are extremely pigmented, and if you want to preserve their vibrancy, you should avoid adding too much water to them. Therefore, every time after cleaning my brush, I dab it into the wad of paper towels to get rid of excess water. So basically, I always work with a slightly damp brush. When I feel that the paints on my mixing tray are too stiff, I dip a corner of my brush carefully into the water, and then I mix that drop of water into the stiff paint. As you can see, my paint seems to be a bit dry when I apply it to the paper, but that's normal. This only happens to the first layers of gouache. Even though my paper is gelatin-sized, it still is a bit absorbent, so with the first contact with the paint, it sucks some moisture from it. Also, in this particular case, the sun hitting the surface of the paper makes my paints dry much faster. Some gouache colors need more water than the others to become manageable. It depends on the properties of the pigments in each particular color. For example, the thickest paint on my palette now is titanium white, also called permanent white in gouache. So I need to add a bit more water to it to make it workable. Transparent pigments like alizarin crimson and ultramarine blue usually need very little water to become fluid enough to be applied to the paper. Some colors are so fluid that you can use them directly from the tubes without adding any water at all to them. I've been getting comments from people saying that they have tried the watercolor painting technique with gouache and the result was always a mess. I'm not surprised because I don't think the watercolor painting technique is suitable for painting with gouache. By its characteristics, gouache is closer to oils or acrylics. It isn't supposed to be diluted like watercolors, because if you add too much water to your gouache colors, it may lead to dusting off, which makes the surface of the painting look dusty. If you have ever worked with acrylics, you know that sometimes you can use them straight from the tubes, and other times you need to add a tiny bit of an acrylic medium to them. But you never want to dilute them until they get runny, like watercolors. It's the same with gouache. It's an opaque medium like oils and acrylics. When working with oils, you need to add linseed oil or another medium to them to make them manageable. With acrylics, you sometimes need to use an acrylic medium. And with gouache, you need to use water. You need very little water to make even the thickest gouache colors manageable. I find this word, manageable, being the best in describing the consistency of gouache paints that are ready to be applied to the paper. If you feel that the color you are using is too dry, you need to add a drop of water to it. If you see that it has gained the fluidity of watercolor, then you probably need to wipe the color off and start over. By the way, those paper towels in the second container have to be replaced once they get soaked. Otherwise, your brush won't be dry enough when you take it to the mixing tray, and it will become difficult to control the consistency of your gouache. There always should be some dry and absorbent paper towels in that second container. Since gouache dries fast, you need to mist your palette and the colors on the mixing tray from time to time while painting. that water will make your squeezed gouache colors more fluid right in the box. So when you take your brush to pick a color, most of the colors will be ready for use. To me, the best way of storing squeezed gouache colors is in this little storage palette that keeps the paints moist for a very long time. I refill the paints when necessary. When I don't use them, I spray them with distilled water once a week. The lid of the box is layered with a soft plastic film that seals the box very well when the lid is on. It effectively prevents the gouache paints from fast drying. I got this box on Amazon. If you need one, you can find a link to it in the description to this video. It might seem that I use a lot of gouache paints, but I actually don't. I do use a lot of white paint, which is usually sold in larger tubes. But as for the other colors, I refill them a couple times a year, so I don't need to buy gouache paints very often. High-quality gouache is heavily pigmented, so if you don't apply it in thick layers, which you should avoid, a set of gouache can last very long. It is of course considering that you work on small sizes. On my opinion, gouache is most suitable for creating small and medium-sized works. If you want to paint on a larger scale, acrylics or oils would probably be a better choice. Acrylics on paper look very similar to gouache. They don't have the beautiful matte finish of gouache, but you can fake it by covering your acrylic painting with a thin layer of matte acrylic varnish. The painting will become completely matte, just like a gouache painting. I have to make a warning regarding the way I'm working in this video. Placing your painting in the sun while working on location isn't a good idea. The sunlight hitting the surface of your painting might be so strong that it can make your colors appear much lighter than they actually are. It means that when you get home and open your sketchbook, you might see that the sketches you painted in the direct sunlight look much darker than they appeared when you were working on them on location. Also, in direct sunlight, gouache dries much faster than in the shade, so you will have to spray your paints every couple of minutes to keep them moist. The day this video was recorded, it was extremely windy, so I couldn't set up my umbrella, and there also was no shade on the pier. Therefore, I took the risk of setting up my easel in the sun. But that was probably the second, maybe the third time in my life that I have worked in such conditions. I usually place my paper or canvas so that it stays in the shade during the painting session. When I can't find a shaded place to hide from the sun, my easel umbrella comes in handy. But an umbrella, of course, can only help when there is no strong wind. I did 2 more paintings on that spot that day, before the wind became so strong that I had to literally run away from the pier. You can see those paintings and many others on my Instagram.